Bueno, amigos, después de 100.000 problemas, queda un minuto. Esto sí que se llama último minuto. Speed Crew 9. Me voy a mover. Sorry, guys. Vamos a ver si cojo una buena toma sin molestar a nadie. Y lo estáis viendo por ahí. Queda un minuto. Estáis viendo esos gases blancos, no es nada más que agua. Eso es el oxígeno líquido que al entrar en contacto con la atmósfera pues se evapora, porque esos tanques, para mantener la presión, lo que hacen es unas válvulas reguladoras lo expulsan. Estamos a nada, 30 segundos. Me imagino que lo estáis viendo desde ahí. Nosotros estamos como a unos 4 kilómetros. Nos han advertido de manera muy reinsistente de que si algo fuese mal, Dios no lo quiera, tenemos que correr hacia el autobús, porque estamos a nada, y lo veáis desde ahí bastante lejos, pues estamos a una distancia la que más cerca se puede estar. Ahora he dejado de ver gases. Me imagino que Fernando me estará escuchando y se nos colará el audio, pero Fernando, confírmame que esto sigue adelante, porque yo desde aquí veo todo nominal. Vale. Vale, dice Fernando que estamos emitiendo, no tengo la cuenta atrás, pero bueno, si me veis sudando como un pollo con la humedad que hace y la temperatura ha sido terrible, y bueno, intentando transmitiros 40 segundos, me dice Fernando, para el lift-off. La verdad es que hay unas rachas de viento importantes, pero si han decidido coger la ventana y estamos a 40 segundos, me imagino que es que van a por ello. Pues nuestros dos astronautas, el cosmonauta ruso Aleksandr Gorbunov, vámonos, ahí está, ¿veis la fumarola? ¿Y cómo está? Tenemos lift-off. Crew 9, vámonos. Ahí lo estáis viendo. Que nunca había visto ahora nos llega la onda sonora. Si la estáis viendo por ahí, vamos a ver si podemos enseñaros. Bueno, nos llega toda. Es impresionante. ¡Impresionante! La onda sonora. No puedo ni hablar. Lo tenemos justo encima de nuestras cabezas. Bueno, esto es increíble. Go Crew 9. Nick Hague, Aleksandr Gorbunov hacia la Estación Espacial Internacional. Vamos a seguir tocando madera por ahora, veo todo nominal. Y han cogido una ventana de tiempo contra todo pronóstico. Teníamos tormentas, teníamos viento, teníamos nubes, teníamos lluvia. Pues ahí están, al rescate de Suni Williams y al rescate de los que se quedaron allí en la Estación Espacial Internacional hasta el mes de febrero. Pues ahí van nuestros astronautas. Estamos viendo, yo creo, la fumarola de lo que es la fase 1 del cohete, que ahora tardará unos 9 minutos en volver. Va a aterrizar a lo que es en el mar. Lo puedo seguir viendo desde aquí. Tengo toda la fumarola, no sé si lo podéis ver. Tengo las gafas de sol, amigos. Lo apreciáis un poco porque hay un montón de nubes. Estoy viendo la fumarola, ha sido absolutamente increíble. Es la primera vez de día, los había visto todos de noche y la verdad es que impresionante. Me imagino que Fernando ahora la señal de SpaceX para ver ese retorno. Tiene la señal de X, me está diciendo que vamos a poder ver el retorno, me imagino. Bueno, Nick Hague, astronauta de la NASA, ingeniero, Aleksandr Gorbunov, cosmonauta del Roscosmos, que van a la Estación Espacial Internacional a rescatar a Buzz Wilmore y a Suni Williams, que se quedaron con la nave Starliner, que se fueron 8 días y que van a estar allí hasta el mes de febrero. Imaginar decir estas familias en julio y hasta el mes de febrero no le vuelves a ver. Pues eso es lo que ha ocurrido con la nave de Boeing. Sigo viendo la fumarola, a ver. Voy a acercar un poco más, tengo mucha interferencia por aquí, voy a intentar no molestar a los miembros de la... Bueno, Fer, dime si se me escucha un poco mejor, porque tengo que salir de aquí. Se oye un poco mejor. Bueno, vemos toda la fumarola primera fase porque tiene... Vale, volvemos con el audio. Ok. Vamos a ver si... hemos podido contar cómo esa primera fase... Vale. Bueno, no sé ya lo que hacer, amigos. Vamos a intentar mejorar este audio. Voy y vengo, me dice Fernando. No sé si tenemos un poco más de señal. Hay un montón de... Esto es un entorno bastante hostil y la verdad es que no es fácil. Como habéis visto, hemos estado en el último segundo. Pues, Fernando, no sé qué decir, si podemos seguir, si no, si nos escuchan o no nos escuchan. Yo estoy viendo todavía... Vale. Bueno, voy a quedarme aquí pegado. Vale, vamos, no sé si podéis ver toda la fumarola que ha dejado desde la... Bueno, allí detrás, ahora lo que está haciendo es apuntar la estación de la primera fase que tendría que irse hacia el mar. Ellos tienen, bueno, hay muchísima nube, con lo cual va a ser difícil de observar. Y bueno, quizás de ver un retorno a lo que es tierra con esa órbita, me imagino que es que no nos está escuchando bien. Sí, sí. Oye, amigos, pues espero que hayáis disfrutado del lanzamiento. Siento, como siempre, los problemas con las conexiones, pero nos vemos pronto.
Of the booster on its way back to Earth. Again, we are tracking the first stage on the left-hand side of your screen and MVAC up in space on the right.
And we do continue to hear good calls for that second stage. Again, we will see this continue to fire until close to 9 minutes into the flight, now at 5 minutes and 45 seconds since liftoff today. This is accelerating Dragon to more than 17,000.
SpaceX, nominal trajectory.
More good news.
Freedom copies, nominal trajectory.
This second stage is bringing Dragon to more than 17,000 miles per hour. That puts our crew in orbit. And the single Merlin vacuum engine can produce over 220,000 pounds of thrust in the vacuum of space.
Stage 1 does perform 3 burns on its way back to Earth. The first is the boost back burn, followed shortly thereafter by the entry burn. The entry burn is used by Falcon 9 to slow the vehicle down before it reaches the denser parts of the Earth's atmosphere.
Dragon, SpaceX, nominal trajectory.
Nominal trajectory is there from Mission Control.
Freedom copies, nominal trajectory.
That entry burn is, of course, followed by the landing burn, during which time we'll light 3 of the Merlin engines on board the first stage. And we expect to see that landing burn just about a minute before we expect Dragon to be inserted into orbit. So we have 2 very exciting phases of flight, both for our first stage and our Crew 9 astronauts happening here at the same time.
Stage 2 of TX has faced.
Saw a great touchdown of stage 1 there just a second ago. And now, of course, we are continuing to follow our Crew 9 astronauts on their way to space.
And we continue to get good calls for this second stage, that Merlin vacuum engine continuing to fire and propel our crew, now moving over 12,600 miles per hour and 611 miles downrange. Just over 8 minutes since liftoff today, so we are expecting to see this continue to fire until just about the 9-minute mark, at which point this engine will cut off. And of course, Dragon will coast for a few minutes, still attached
Terminal
to the
guide.
second stage.
Shannon.
That call.
Copy. Shannon.
That call is for Shannon, Ireland. That would be the abort zone if we were to abort at this point in the flight. However, we are continuing to hear good calls about Dragon's performance.
MVAC shutdown.
Confirmation of the Merlin vacuum engine shutting down.
Dragon, SpaceX, nominal orbit insertion.
Good news there from
And Freedom
Mission,
copies nominal orbital insertion.
from Mission Control and our crew that we have had nominal
Dragon,
orbit insertion.
SpaceX, launch escape system disarmed.
Freedom copies LES disarmed.
In 9 quick minutes, we now have 2 new crew members on their way to the International Space Station, having taken off from Space Launch Complex 40. The crew now being in a good or expected orbit. We'll continue to coast for these few minutes, and then we get our first views inside the capsule of our 2 crew members, Nick Hague and Aleksandr Gorbunov. They are just continuing to stay in their suits and in their seats during this dynamic portion of the flight. We're going to continue to coast for a few minutes after this second stage engine cutoff. This allows the rates and motion from that long burn to settle out. There are some small reaction thrusters on the upper stage the upper part of the second stage that can be used to counteract any residual motion. That basically makes sure we're in a stable coast before Dragon separates from Falcon, and that'll happen about 12 minutes into the flight. So about a minute and a half from now, we expect to see Dragon actually separating from the second stage. Again, we did hear the crew has been successfully inserted into a good orbit. And again, this is them now in microgravity, one of them, Aleksandr Gorbunov, for the very first time.
So as Leah mentioned, we are now just a few minutes away from the separation of Dragon from stage 2, during which time a number of activation checkouts occur. Automatically, first we're going to be checking out 12 of the Draco maneuvering thrusters, all around the service section of the Dragon spacecraft. We're also, of course, going to get ready for that nose cone opening, which will allow Dragon to dock with the International Space Station about 28 hours from now. The nose cone stays closed for the flight uphill to help protect against all of the guidance, navigation, and control sensors and Dragon's docking adapter. It's also covering 4 of our Draco thrusters that will be used for the majority of different phasing burns required as Dragon chases down the space station. We are currently standing by for that separation, which could happen anytime in the next couple of minutes.
Currently, you can see the crew is just relaxing in their seats. They are definitely vigilant, though. They are able to monitor those crew displays in
Buenas
front of them,
tardes,
keep up
son
with what's
las
going on in the mission.
11:52
They could
aquí,
take
las
control if they needed to. However, it's been a
5:52
seamless
en
ride to
España.
space today.
Teníamos previsto empezar el directo a las 6 en punto,
Good news there, looking
pero
up into Dragon's front,
nos vamos a
looking at the heat
retrasar
shield on the
porque
bottom of Dragon.
bueno,
The
tenemos
crew
la
now will use
tormenta
when it
justo
returns
encima,
home early
hay
next
problemas
year.
de rayos, nos han metido dentro del autobús. Hay un control de seguridad adicional que van a traer ahora los perros. Nos han hecho sacar todo el equipo, todas las cámaras, trípodes y bueno, pues estamos aquí dentro del autobús esperando a ver qué pasa. Os cuento dónde estoy, podéis ver la cuenta atrás, 1 hora y 23 minutos con 49 segundos. Es buena señal que ese reloj siga en marcha, porque eso significa que por ahora pues todavía deben ver alguna oportunidad para que el cohete salga. pero el cielo la verdad es que no tiene demasiada buena pinta. Os voy a enseñar la otra vista. Podéis ver el edificio de NASA justo detrás.
Godspeed, Crew 9.
Couldn't say it any better. Thank you guys. You know, we had the opportunity to meet so many people that were involved with the Falcon 9, and along the way was a sweet ride. I'm pretty sure my youngest son would say it was Sigma. Alex has got a few words to add as well.
All the entities that made this launch possible. Roscosmos, NASA, with SpaceX. And thank you to my family and friends for their support. And also I'd like to express my gratitude to the hundreds of thousands of people around the world who are involved in the development of space technologies and to move humanity forward. Today's launch is also their accomplishment. Хочу сказать спасибо Роскосмосу, НАСА совместно со SpaceX за успешный запуск человека на орбиту, за очередной успешный запуск, и также благодарить родных и близких за поддержку. Спасибо.
Incredible words from our commander and great views of Dragon up in orbit on your screen right now.
It's been about 14 minutes and 30 seconds since coming up on 15 minutes now since liftoff today. You got a quick look inside the capsule.
Dragon SpaceX, we had a nominal dehumidifier activation and service section Draco checkouts. Nose code and deploy is in progress.
And Freedom copies all. Thank you.
Confirmation there that our nose cone deploy is underway. That means that the 6 hooks that hold the nose cone in place during launch and the ascent portions of flight have begun to retract. That will allow the nose cone to start to swing open and deploy. That will uncover a number of critical systems for the flight up to the space station, including the forward bulkhead thrusters and the docking hatch. Incredible views from our crew up in space on your screen right now, but I'm sure it's nothing compared to the view out of Dragon's window as they make their way to the space station.
I can only imagine. And that journey to the space station will take about 28 hours, so they won't arrive until tomorrow afternoon. In the meantime, they will have the opportunity to get out of their suits, to get out of their seats as well, and kind of just enjoy the ride. They're going to shift into some off-duty time. That allows them to prepare any food that they would want to. That allows them to maybe even call down to the ground. They will also obviously get some sleep before a really big day tomorrow, monitoring the arrival and docking to the International Space Station. Of course, we're going to cover all of that live. I'm really looking forward to seeing 2 more crew members float into the orbiting laboratory. And if you're just joining us, we did lift off now at 16 minutes and 29 seconds ago. That was right on time at 1:17 p.m. Eastern Time from Space Launch Complex 40 down at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. We have 2 members on board Dragon today. That's NASA astronaut Nick Hague, who's serving as the commander, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Aleksandr Gorbunov, who's making his very first flight to space. Once they arrive at the International Space Station tomorrow afternoon, they will be joining 9 other crew members on orbit. They'll be up there for about a week. A week is probably the best guess, until the Crew 8 team, it is time for that crew to come home. Of course, they launched about 7 months ago at this point, and they will undock after they have completed a handover period with the Crew 9 crew, bringing them up to speed on everything that they've been working on for the last 7 months in orbit. So once they depart, we'll be back down to our typical approximately 7 people living and working aboard the International Space Station.
We are getting really spectacular views from up in space today. Shot there of our MVAC engine. We did get confirmation several minutes ago of SES-1.
And we know that nose cone opening is underway as well. Those are a series of hooks and latches that allow the nose cone to open. And that nose cone is closed during launch to protect the docking hatch, to protect 4 bulkhead thrusters that we will use for some of the larger burns that help us get to the International Space Station.
One of the other things we're doing right now is going ahead and opening the ECLSS system, which stands for the Environmental Control and Life Support System, which will be activated inside of Dragon. As Leah mentioned earlier, soon our crew will be able to get their visors open and get out of their spacesuits and settle in for that 28-hour ride to the International Space Station. Good views there of the opening of Dragon's nose cone on the left-hand side of your screen.
And coming up on 19 minutes since liftoff today, the crew, again, had a good orbital insertion, and that actually puts 14 people currently in low Earth orbit. That includes those living on the International Space Station right now, as well as those living on the Chinese space station. So a total of 14 humans are now not off the planet, but rather orbiting around it.
More good views from our Dragon nose cone on the left-hand side of your screen. As it very gradually swings open. Obviously, in space, everything we do has an equal and opposite reaction, so slow and steady really wins the race here.
Again, now 20 minutes since liftoff today. Dragon is flying free from the second stage, and it looks like they're about to enter an orbital nighttime. So now that they're at orbital velocity, that's 17,500 miles per hour, they are going to see 16 sunrises and sunsets a day. Again, it was an on-time liftoff at 1:17 p.m. Eastern Time from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida, and a clean ride uphill.
We've had some good communication from Mission Control up to our Crew 9 astronauts already today. One of the things you may hear every time we communicate with the crew is a slight beep beforehand. That's called a Quindar tone, and actually dates all the way back to the early days of human spaceflight, and is effectively a radio signal indicating that we're communicating between the crew in orbit and our Mission Control team on the ground.
We now have views back inside the capsule.
Dragon SpaceX, we had a nominal nose cone opening. We do have just about 3 minutes here left in the ground station pass, if you've got any fluffy stowaways you'd like to introduce.
And Freedom copies, good Draco checkout, good nose cone opening. And I just so happen to have a furry friend with me. Yeah, SpaceX Freedom. So yeah, I've got a little Falcon here. I love the package of Falcon 9, Crew 9. Yeah, we've got a Falcon on board with us. This one's a multi-flyer though. Was on my first flight with Alexa and I, and
Gracias especial a Fernando y a Nacho Sevilla por vuestro apoyo, a mi mujer que me aguanta todas estas locuras y las vive conmigo. Y sobre todo gracias a vosotros, ¿no? Por estar ahí. Sortearemos en algún momento el parche. Mañana nos vemos en Radio Respeto. Ahora tengo que conducir de vuelta a casa. que tengo una buena tunda de coche, y mañana tenemos a Vicente Garrido en Radio El Respeto para hablar sobre los psicópatas integrados, así que no os lo podéis perder. Y mañana sortearemos el parche para los que hayáis estado en el directo de hoy. Como dice Gloria, bendita locura, claro que sí. Por favor, permanecer atentos para el vídeo que voy a colgar ahora, porque ya cuando he tirado la cámara, el micro, todo, diciendo, bueno, ya voy a coger el móvil y voy a intentar grabar el retorno, la bomba sónica, y se ha grabado, así que espero que lo podáis escuchar. Ahora os lo cuelgo, amigos, y bueno, dice Sergio de YouTube, venimos aquí y tira porque me toca. ¿A quién le tocó el parche? Pues Sergio, mañana lo vamos a sortear, ¿vale? Tenemos recogido quién ha estado en el directo de hoy, y mañana lo sorteo durante Radio El Respeto, durante el programa de Vicente Garrido, así que ya os enteraréis. Gracias por estar ahí, permanecer atentos a ese retorno del Falcon con la bomba sónica, porque es brutal. Ahora os lo juego. Gracias, amigos, os quiero mucho. Soñad, soñad.
From low Earth orbit, both to the International Space Station and on our free flyer missions as well.
From DNA sequencing to 3D printing, studies enabled by Dragon and the International Space Station test a variety of technologies, systems, and materials that will be needed for future long-duration exploration missions.
Orbit,
Every
both
mission
to the
yields
International
critical
Space Station
research and
and on our
learnings that
free
help
flyer
make
missions
life
as
both
well.
on Earth and in space better. And flights like today's help us continue to lay this foundation for our future among the stars and continue our mission to make life multiplanetary.
But for now, we'll be signing off from SpaceX, and we're going to send you back over to NASA. But before we go, we do want to thank NASA for entrusting us with today's mission. And of course, thank you to all of the viewers for being here with us today.
Yeah, it was a really special mission. It was fantastic to see now 2 new crew members in orbit and on the way to the International Space Station. So with that, we're going to end our coverage from Hawthorne until we pick back up with our docking coverage in about 26 hours. So for now, we're going to send it back to you, Zena and Daryl at Kennedy Space Center to wrap up today's launch coverage.
Thank you very much, Leah and Atticus, and welcome back here to the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, where just about 25 minutes ago, we watched Crew 9 lift off from Space Launch Complex 40 for the first time with humans at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. NASA astronaut in Hague and Roscosmos cosmonaut Aleksandr Gorbunov are now to the International Space Station. I'm Daryl Dale, this is NASA astronaut Zena Carpenter, who has been with us in the past 4 hours, documenting Crew 9's path from astronaut got to watch this space.
Yeah, Daryl.